One of the things we mentioned a lot is sleep hygiene. We haven't actually defined what we mean by sleep hygiene. So I think it's a useful thing to jump into, which is not the idea of, it's not brushing your teeth. But obviously that's important, but that's not a sleep thing necessarily. But it's more the idea that hygiene is to do with cleanliness and making sure that things have a routine. And sleep hygiene is just basically when you've worked out what your sleep routine is, you know you need to get 8 hours sleep. We need to block out 8 hours of time between when you need to wake up and when you need to go to bed then. And then the sleep hygiene happens a little bit before that. I need to be in bed and asleep by this time process. And it's basically the idea of putting yourself in your parasympathetic nervous system, calming yourself down, getting yourself ready for a sleep state. Basically boring yourself to sleep. For people who struggle to fall asleep earlier than, if you are a night owl and you need to go to bed earlier, you're going to have to bore yourself. You're going to have to find yourself, being, reading, doing things that, low lights, like just being as unstimulated as you possibly can to help yourself, to give yourself every single possible chance to fall asleep a little bit earlier. So sleep hygiene, one of the main things we talk about with sleep hygiene is this idea that your phone, if you possibly can, should not be in the room with you, because your phone is a disaster for sleep. Because, to put it really simply, it's far too interesting. It's just your brain wants to use it, talk about it, like flip on, do the addiction stuff. We talked about that before. Like it's too interesting for your brain. And if you are using your phone, your brain is not going to be able to calm itself down and fall asleep. And this is a contentious issue because I have this conversation with clients a lot. I have this conversation with people in primary schools a lot, and they say, "Oh, I actually fall asleep watching like TV," and I fall asleep watching screens, and so my screen isn't that interesting. And there's a bit of a balance to these things. Obviously you can fall asleep on a screen, but what's actually happening there is the kind of weight of sleep pressure in your brain is overwhelming the fact that your brain is quite interested in this thing. And there's obviously a lot of arguments about white noise and stuff like that. Like there's too much to go into in this episode, but as a general rule, screens are far too interesting, and even if they don't necessarily always stop you falling asleep, they will affect the depth of sleep that you are able to achieve. And that is such an important part, because we won't go into today, but you've already mentioned them broadly. Again, there's NREM sleep, there's REM sleep, and those happen at different parts of the night. If you are on your screen super late into the evening, even if you are able to fall asleep very quickly, your ability to get into your NREM sleep, your REM sleep, might be affected by that stuff. And you might wake up more, and that stuff. So you need to make sure that we're not doing that. And for older people, making sure that we're not drinking water just before we go to bed, because it's going to wake us up and we're going to go to the toilet. And that's going to mean that it's affecting our sleep, consistently throughout the night. And I think that there's a lot more to sleep than just go to bed on time and wake up at the same time.
For sure.
Obviously, that's a kind of a fundamental part of
It's
it.
routine, isn't it? Like you said, it's getting into your routine, your bit of comfortability, where you know that I do this at this time, and I do my teeth here, and I go for a shower, whatever, and then I wind down, read a book, read the history of barrel production in 16th century England.
Oh, that's going to put you to sleep,
incredibly. Well, that's actually one of the most exciting volumes there is out there. So I'd recommend maybe moving to the 18th century barrel production. So I think it's just really important.
That might be your best joke you've ever made.
Thank you so much. I was thinking about it the whole time you were speaking.
That was so funny. Well done.
Thank you, man. So I just think it's just really important to understand, like you say, we're constantly just trying to be metacognitive and self-aware, and just understanding how you operate and the sort of impulses you have, which is for most of us, go on your phone, watch telly, those sorts of things, but fighting against that and actually going, I will just read, and I joke, I jest, but like I read books that I find really interesting, but that still helps me go into my parasympathetic nervous system and calms me down. So it's just really important. And I think there is a bit of a disclaimer just to make, because you mentioned water before bed if you're a bit of a elderly seasoned individual listening to the podcast, and I think there's an element of that sort of thing that is unavoidable if you've got certain medical.
Oh, for sure, no, for 100%, and
but like that,
yes,
that's red tape for us.
No, exactly, and I think, and this is why this is a tricky thing to do. In like a podcast episode, is like to give out kind of uniform advice to everyone. It's not that everyone's cases are different. Like I remember, knowing this stuff from younger than I am now. I used to live in university housing. I used to live at home with my family. I couldn't have my phone outside my room because it wasn't my room. There's the only place I could have it, really, because it was my only space that was mine. Like I had to have my phone in my room. Now that I live on my own, I can literally put my phone in another room from where I sleep. But that wasn't something I could do. So anything that's like uniform, like you have to do this, is not true. But what we're talking about here is you need to develop a kind of, the general rules are you need to have 8 hours in bed. You need to ideally be in bed a bit before your kind of cut off window where you need to try and be asleep, and you need to be getting yourself into your parasympathetic nervous system. So low stimulation, ideally off screens, reading things. If you're reading on an iPad, okay, fine, but let's turn notifications off. Like there's black and white the screen. Like let's be as low stimulation as possible to try and let ourselves fall asleep. And the other thing is to try and keep that consistent across days, as much as you possibly can. Try and go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every day, including weekends, because that is really, really important, because it's about consistency, because your brain is very, very good at habits and routines. You can make your sleep habit a habit, which means that you'll naturally find yourself waking up at the same time every day. And I find this, I wake up at 7 o'clock basically every single day, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, but it like doesn't vary very much. I go to bed at about, I'm in bed by 10 every night, right? That's kind of my rule. Some nights when you're out late, you're at a gig or something, you can't be in bed by 10. I still wake up at 7 because my brain's learned that, even though I then wake up and I'm like, man, I need more sleep. The habit and the routine of it is something your brain has learned. So that's why it's so important. And that's what I mean about, you can't change your chronotype. You can't change, if you're an owl, that you want to go to bed later, you would naturally go to bed later. But by forming a habit, you can help yourself to get better sleep every night than you would if you were just like, I'm going to wait till I'm tired. If you kind of force it a little bit, if that makes sense. But yeah, you're 100% right. None of this stuff is universal advice that applies to everyone, because it is more complicated than that. Like, I wake up in the middle of the night and I go to the toilet sometimes, like, and I don't have a medical condition that requires that, and it is more complicated than, you can't just take each of these advice and then have fantastic sleep. It matters. And if you're really struggling with sleep, some people have conditions like insomnia, which, like, categorically, there's a certain level of routine that can help, but there's a certain level of stuff that not much we can do about some of the kind of underveiling stuff in there. So get in contact if you've got a specific sleep need that you are struggling with, and please get in contact. We'll do our best to help you, and obviously talk to doctors, talk to medical practitioners and professionals in terms of this stuff, because they know as much as you hopefully now do how important sleep is. And it's just the main thing, as we said at the start, to take away from this episode is just, it is so vital that you get more sleep. And I say get more sleep because the chances are you're not getting enough. Obviously getting too much sleep is also a problem, but getting too little sleep is by far a bigger issue. So you need to be getting more sleep. You need to be getting at least 7.5 hours a night. Some people need more, some people need slightly less, but you do not need 6. You do not need 5. You cannot get by on 4. It's not true. You cannot. You might be able to in the moment, as you said earlier, but we haven't even gone into long-term health effects of sleep. Basically, every single horrible thing that can happen when you get older, if you don't look after your body, is worsened by a lack of sleep when you're younger. So you need to be getting more sleep now. So, not trying to scare everyone, but go to bed.